What's going on, everybody? It's yours truly, Coach Mike Dub, here with another edition of the Lockdown Defense Sports Studio. I'm glad that you all joined. Hopefully, summer is off to a great start. If you're here, that means that you know what's going on. We're getting this much closer to camp, counting down, the mini camps, counting down all the things leading up to the start of the season. And of course, we're doing our series breaking down each team division by division. And this week, we are happy to bring you the AFC East. So none other than the Bills, Patriots, Jets, and Dolphins. And yours truly, I have the pleasure of breaking down the 2025 New York Jets. What to expect from them? How do we grade their offseason? What moves did we like? What moves didn't we like? Their draft, all of the aboard. And then ultimately, what can we expect to them coming into the 2025 season? So let me know in the comments what you think, if you agree, if you disagree, where this team will be and what you rank them and their offseason moves. So let's jump right into it. First and foremost, they started the offseason off with free agency. Just like everybody else, they had to make some big news. Of course, quarterback position was the number one thing that they wanted to tackle. They got that done, bringing in Justin Fields. I love the pickup. 2 years, $40 million is the quarterback position. You're going to have to pay for something. I do believe that Justin Fields can play in this league. I think he could play at a high level. He really just has to be put in a situation that has a team and a coach and a culture that believes in him. I don't think he's had that yet. He started to get a little bit of a spark in Chicago. Unfortunately, the cards just fell where they had a chance to get what they felt was going to be a generational quarterback, so they moved on from him. If it was a different time, if Caleb Williams was not the quarterback that was available, if there wasn't a superstar quarterback available in the draft, I think that they would have rolled out with Justin Fields and they would have put weapons around him to make that happen. Some people may even believe that they should have kept him and went a different way. As far as that goes, whatever. The Bears did what they needed to do. I say all that to say Justin Fields has not been this is not his third team because he can't play. It's not a situation where I think people don't believe in Justin Fields or he's not able to play at this level. That's not what the case is. In the case of Justin Fields, I think he's just looking for the best fit. And we're going to get into some of this a little bit later on when we talk about their draft picks, but I think the New York Jets recognize that they have to make themselves the perfect fit for Justin Fields in order for it to work. And I think it's possible. They're at a situation right now with their team. They're young enough that they can, choose what direction they want to go in. Their roster is young enough. Their new coaching staff coming in, they're starting from scratch anyway. So I think with a nice young quarterback that you can build your future around, you can definitely build out your identity and what you want to support Justin Fields. I say all that to say I like the pickup. I think that he is going to do well in New York. We'll talk about some of the other things that they put around him and then also the coaching staff and what they're going to need to do in order to make him successful. But that's where we start with their free agency. They didn't make a lot of big splashes. I think what they were looking to do was fill some holes, obviously, get some depth with this team, specifically, in the trenches, the offensive line. We saw them try to solidify that. And then also on the back end, we saw safety, corner, some guys that really, like I said, they're not, in my opinion, they're not really going to move the needle from, to make you a over the top team or make you a championship contender or anything like that. But these are a lot of depth pieces that are going to go far as, filling out your roster, helping out with injuries. We've seen the Jets be plagued with injuries in the past, especially on that defensive line. We're seeing Jermaine Johnson, who's hopefully going to come back this year, be strong. They're depending on him to, come out big. A few other guys. So you really wanted to make sure that you got a team that was going to be, from top to bottom, just overall competing, a team that could compete in the NFC and the AFC East as well as throughout the whole NFL. And it starts with depth and it starts with filling that roster out. So that's really what they attacked. Jamin Davis, an edge rusher from Washington, is going to be interesting to see how he's going to be able to, start from scratch with a new home. Things didn't work out well with him in Washington. A lot of people were throwing that bust word around. So, I'm going to be interested to seeing if he can turn that around. And of course, along with free agency comes some departures. The big three that you have to look at: Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams, and then also C.J. Mosley, who's been a staple there for a long time. So clearly, they're getting a lot younger. They tried the Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams experiment. They had some spark towards the end of the season that actually didn't look quite bad towards the end of the season, to be honest with you. But it just took too long to get that thing rolling. And of course, there's not much future there. Those guys, that chemistry, their best years are behind them. For this organization, they're looking forward, which is why they went with a young quarterback that they could build around, and ultimately why they decided to go their separate ways with Devontae Adams and Aaron Rodgers, of course, in his whole situation, and even C.J. Mosley. So getting younger across the board, we look to see that was the goal here, and also adding depth. I don't hate the moves. I see where the vision is. I think this is definitely a team that's poised to rebuild and position themselves to compete. Maybe not this year, but in the upcoming years. And like I said, they got a fresh new coach in there. They're trying to give him all the tools that he needs to be successful. They're not a team that's trying to build overnight. They're trying to build things from the ground up, similar to where Aaron Glenn came from in Detroit and how they built things from the ground up. It's going to take some time. It's a little different in New York than it is Detroit as far as the media and the expectations for the team. But hey, you got to start somewhere, and I can see the vision of where they were going with free agency. They continue that vision onto the draft. Let me just say this. I actually love the draft from the Jets this year. From top to bottom, not only did they get guys that were dogs and playmakers, and I feel like they have probably 4 to 5 guys here that are going to make immediate impacts. They also got positions of need that are going to come in and play right away. These are not just special teams fillers and guys that are going to, try to, be, backups for whatever. These are guys that could potentially be um, bookends, I guess, if you want to say in the eyes of a tackle, or for the defensive guys and even the tight ends. These are guys that could be staples for your organization going forward. Starting off with Membu, the fact that they are doubling down on their offensive line tells me that they have an identity that they want to go with. Coming into last year, we remember everybody talking about their backfield with Brees Hall and Braylon Allen and that whole backfield situation. And now they went in, they're returning for their 5 offensive linemen this year. And the 5th guy that they're not returning, or the 5th guy on that offensive line, is going to be their first round pick, a lottery pick at number 7. So I think that offensive line is going to be their bread and butter. You add in there the run game with Justin Fields. This is a team that is definitely going to try to run the ball, definitely, or at least that's the identity that I see what they're trying to build, which I believe would be going in the right direction. They're a team that's going to try to ground and pound you, play good defense, and really compete for games towards the end. Wear them out, control the clock, different things like that. Everywhere that Justin Fields has been successful, he's been a major part of the run game. Now you add in a good offensive line behind him, a solid run game with the running backs as well. That's the position that you see them going in. And then also with their second pick, what's a quarterback's best option and best friend is a nice big target, a tight end that's essentially like another wide receiver. So you got Mason Taylor. I love the pick. Of course, we already know about the dog out there at wide receiver and Garrett Wilson. So I see what they're trying to do. Then on top of that, they got in. I like the pick. We're not going to skip over, of course, the DB from Florida State, and also nice wide receiver that they added. But really, Malachi Moore, the safety from Alabama, that's another guy that could come in and make an immediate impact. All of these picks, I think, are great picks. I love the direction that they're going. I think that their draft was the highlight or the best thing that they did this offseason. Based off of grades alone on the draft, without getting into anything else, I give them an A for their draft. So we're going to see how everything else shapes out, how it plays in with the other offseason moves. But the highlight of their offseason to me was definitely the draft. The big news for them, of course, they brought in a new coaching staff. Aaron Glenn was one of the hottest commodities coming out of Detroit. All the things that they did there. Of course, they lost both of their coordinators. He was a defensive coordinator. Now he's coming to the Jets, where he was a former player. It's going to be interesting to see how he does. Now, the interesting thing that I'm going to bring up is not their defensive coordinator, Steve Wilks, former head coach for Arizona. Also a former, I think it was the interim head coach for Carolina as well, and did pretty well in Carolina. He only had 1 year at Arizona. He got out of there pretty quick, but he did pretty well as an interim coach in Carolina. So I think Steve Wilkes, will be fine. I have a lot of questions about the offensive coordinator. And the reason why is because Aaron Glenn brought him over from Detroit with him, but he was the passing game coordinator in Detroit. And pretty much throughout his career, he's been the passing game coordinator. If you watch Detroit play, the passing game was very successful. However, like I talked about in previous slides, New York is going to have to be a run the ball first offense. If they're going to throw the ball, they're going to have to work it off of play action and use the run to open up the pass game, which I understand that's a little bit about what Detroit did, but Detroit was able to run the ball. If I was going to take anybody from Detroit, it would have been their run coordinator, or it would have been the person who was setting up those running lanes for those two running backs, and maybe try to mirror that. I really see New York trying to be the AFC version of Detroit based off of how they built their team. The only difference is they have a different style of quarterback, and a little bit of differences here and there. But I'm interested to see how their offensive coordinator translates his expertise to what the Jets are trying to do from a identity standpoint. Are they going to continue to try to, like I said, go with what their personnel says, which would be a more physical type of offense, not a lot of finesse? Or are they going to try to fit into what the offensive coordinator has shown in his past, which has been a passing first, pass predominant game? So that's going to be interesting to see how that all goes along. But I do know that Aaron Glenn is a huge players coach. The players are going to love playing for him. And I think the guys love him having him in the building. Obviously, he has familiarity with the city and familiarity with the organization. So we're going to see how that whole shapes out, how that thing shapes out. And finally, we're going to pull up their schedule. As always, the Jets, of course, are fighting in the AFC East. It's always going to be tough. But some games you want to circle here. You got a few playoff teams here. Tampa Bay, which went to the playoffs last year. Denver, another playoff team on there as well. Some tough games that you look at. Cincinnati, never going to be easy. Of course, the divisional opponents, you got to look out for teams like the Patriots. You got to look out for teams like Carolina, who's getting better. Dallas, of course, Buffalo, even Tampa Bay, we mentioned before. So they don't have a really easy schedule. It's not going to be a schedule that they can, just breeze past or anything like that. Even opening up with Pittsburgh, you don't know what you're going to get from there. Aaron Rodgers, quote unquote, revenge game. So there's going to be a lot of eyes on them. It's not the toughest schedule in the world, but it will be a schedule that is going to be, you know, going to be one to keep your eyes on to see how they respond to it. In my opinion, I think that they finish out stronger than they start. I think that they're going to get off to a little bit of a rough start just because I think it's going to take some time for them to get their bearings and figure out what direction they want to go and figure out how they want to do things. By the time they get to the end of the season, I think they're going to be a little bit more poised as far as their identity. Hopefully, injuries hold up, and I think that they will be a little bit better on. I think a majority of their wins will come towards the end of the season. I don't see them as a playoff team, wild card team, anything like that. I think their ceiling is probably 7 wins, best case scenario. I look at them as a 6 or 7 win team. Like I said, most of those wins will probably come off the back end of the season after they get a little bit of chemistry going and get guys to buy into it. The thing is, playing in New York, you're going to have to keep those guys focused and keep the locker room bought in towards that whole, tough stretch of the season. So we'll see how they do. Like I said, it's not the toughest schedule in the world, but there are some playoff pockets, some playoff teams in there, and some tough games in there. That's definitely going to be a testament to their coach and their preparation and also their professionalism going down that end. All right. So finally, what do I give their offseason grades? I kind of gave a glimpse into the predictions already, but overall offseason grade, I give the Jets a C plus. And the reason why I give them a C plus is because they didn't really make a lot of splashes in free agency. Uh, they did what they needed to do. I don't think that this is a team that really went into the offseason thinking, okay, we're going to make some big splashes and we're going to compete this year. I think they set the foundation, which is solid, and I respect it. I love their draft, like I said, but free agency and as far as other moves, they weren't as aggressive as they could have been, but I understand it. I think they're setting the foundation for building something that may take a few years, but they're hoping will last a lot longer. So overall, I give them a C plus. Predictions, like I said, probably around a 6 win team. 7 wins possibly. I don't see them getting more than 8 wins, even, past that. I will be very surprised if that happens. So let me know your thoughts. Let me know what you agree with, what you disagree with. Did you like their offseason moves? How do you feel about the coaching changes? Should they or shouldn't they have moved on from Aaron Rodgers? Only time will tell. But in the meantime, you can find us all on our socials. Hit us up, like, comment, follow us, and let us know what you think. And until next time, it's yours truly, Coach Mike Dubb.